Smoke covered the sky. The land was broken and full of fire. Dead soldiers, human and alien, lay all around. Explosions still echoed in the distance. But here, it was quiet. In the middle of the dust and pain, a body moved. She dragged herself through the dirt, leaving a trail of blood. Her name was Vela. She was a proud alien warrior, strong and feared, but now she had no legs. Her black and green armor was broken. Her glowing silver hair was dirty and tangled. She had fought hard. She had led her squad into battle, but a hidden mine took everything from her in 1 second. The blast had burned her legs to the bone. Her people saw it. They saw her fall, screaming, and they turned away. "We leave her," said her second in command. "She is no longer useful." Then they ran. No one came back. Vela's eyes burned with tears, not from pain, but from betrayal. Her own soldiers left her like trash. She had given her life to them, and now they gave her nothing. She tried to crawl, but her strength was fading. Her green skin turned pale. She pressed her hand to the bleeding stump of her leg. It was hot and wet. Her breath came in short gasps. "Let it end," she whispered. "No more." But the war didn't care, and the desert kept burning. Then footsteps, heavy, slow, steady. Boots crushed the sand nearby. She froze. A shadow moved over her, a human figure, tall, armored, covered in dust and blood. His helmet was cracked, face rough and tired. He had a scar across his jaw and sharp blue eyes. Sergeant Jackson Cole, a human Marine, her enemy. Vela reached for a blade, but her hand was too weak. She looked up at him, angry, helpless. "Do it," she hissed. "Finish it." But he didn't lift his weapon. He didn't move to kill her. Instead, he knelt down, quiet, calm. He looked into her eyes, not like a soldier, but like a man who saw pain. "You're hurt bad," he said. She blinked in shock. "I'm your enemy," she spat. "You should kill me." Jackson shook his head slowly. "I've seen enough death today," he said. "Too much." He reached into his pack and pulled out a small med kit. He scanned her wounds. Her leg was still bleeding, barely hanging on. He took out a sealant tube and pressed it to her skin. She screamed in pain. Her fingers dug into the dirt. But she didn't stop him. Some part of her wanted to live. "Why?" she gasped. "Why are you helping me?" He paused, then said, "Because you're still alive. That's enough for me." She laughed bitterly. "You humans are fools. Maybe," he said, tying a bandage. "But we don't leave people behind." She stared at him, confused. "No one's ever said that to me." "Then maybe someone should have," he replied. He looked around. No cover, no shelter. He couldn't leave her here. If drones found her, they'd finish the job. If scavengers came, they'd take her, piece by piece. So he made a choice, a crazy one. He put his rifle on his back, then reached down and lifted her in his arms. She groaned, her body weak and heavy. But he didn't complain. He carried her like she weighed nothing, like she was more than just an enemy. "You're insane," she whispered. He smiled. "Probably." He started walking across the broken battlefield. Dust swirled around them. Fires burned in the distance. The sky turned red as the sun began to set. "Where are you taking Emmy?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," he said. "If that even exists." For a while, neither of them spoke. The wind howled. The ground burned. But the human didn't stop, and the alien didn't fight. She rested her head against his shoulder. "Jackson," she said softly. "Yeah? I don't understand you." "You don't have to," he replied. "You just have to live." And far above them, a drone lens turned, zooming in on the human and the broken alien girl in his arms. A red light blinked. Someone was watching. The war wasn't over. Not for them. Not yet. Jackson's boots sank into the ash-covered sand. Each step was slow, heavy, and painful. But he kept walking, not for himself, but for the broken alien warrior in his arms. Vela was unconscious now. Her skin, once glowing green, was cold and damp. Her armor was cracked, her body weak, yet Jackson refused to let go. He didn't know why. Maybe he was tired of following orders that made no sense. Maybe he was done watching people get left behind. Or maybe, just maybe, he saw something in her that reminded him of someone. Every few steps he had to stop and catch his breath, but he never dropped her, not even when the scanners buzzed in his helmet. "Movement detected," the voice inside his earpiece said. He looked up, scanning the area. A dark shape moved in the distance fast. Low to the ground, too fast to be human, too smooth to be wild. Jackson didn't wait to find out. He turned sharply and rushed toward the nearby canyon wall. There, half buried in sand, was a damaged escape pod. Its door was jammed open, and wires sparked inside. But it was better than open ground. He slipped inside, laid Vela down, and shut the door as best he could. Then he sat beside her, rifle aimed at the entrance, breathing hard, heartbeat loud in his ears. Outside, the sound returned, skittering metal feet. He knew that sound, recon drones, designed to hunt survivors and erase all evidence. One wrong move, and they'd be dead inside. The pod. Vela stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, and she groaned in pain. "You're still here," she whispered. He nodded. "Told you I don't leave people behind." "You should," she said, voice raspy. "I'm dead weight." He gave a tired smirk. "You're lighter than my gear." She looked at him, confused. "You're different from the others. Good different or bad?" She didn't answer, just closed her eyes again. But her fingers reached out slightly, just enough to brush his glove. Jackson checked her wounds again. Her leg was turning darker. Infection was spreading fast. He opened his medkit and injected another dose of pain blocker. Not much left, only 2 syringes. He'd have to choose soon. Use the last one on her, or save it for himself. Suddenly, a red light blinked on the pod wall. Scanner alert. The drones were getting closer. He looked at Vela, then at the back of the pod. There was a hidden hatch, an emergency sled inside. He quickly pulled it out. It was meant for gear, but she would have to fit. He slid her onto it, strapped her down, and attached the cable to his waist. "I'm going to pull you," he said. She blinked slowly. "You're insane." "Yeah," he said. "But I'm your only ride." He kicked the back hatch open, stepped into the cold wind, and began dragging her. The sled cut across the sand with a sharp noise too loud. But he had no choice. Behind them, the drones began to move faster. A soft hum turned into a sharp whine. Vela raised her head, barely. "They're coming." Jackson didn't look back. "Then let them," he said. "I'm not stopping." A drone flew over the ridge, black, spider-like, with a glowing red core. It aimed at them. Jackson dropped the sled cable, turned, and fired. One shot miss. Second shot direct hit. The drone exploded in midair. 2 more appeared. Jackson turned to Vela. "Can you still shoot?" She reached under her chest plate and pulled out a hidden blaster. Her hands were shaky, but her aim was still sharp. One drone flew left. She fired direct hit. Jackson shot the second in the wing. It spun out, crashed, and burst into flames. Silence returned. Only the wind and the hum of the sled. Jackson breathed out. "You're still a fighter." She gave a small smile. "So are you." He picked up the sled rope again and kept walking. This time slower, but stronger. The canyon ahead opened into a flat desert. Far away, Jackson saw a small broken tower. A comms outpost, maybe still working, maybe not, but it was their only hope. He looked down at Vela, who had fallen asleep again. Her breathing was better, but time was running out. He whispered to the wind, "Just hold on, we're almost there." But neither of them saw the sensor blink deep in the rocks. A different kind of machine had just found them. Not drones, not human, something older. And it had just changed its path, straight toward them. The sun dipped low in the sky, turning the desert blood red. Jackson pulled the sled one step at a time. Each drag left deep lines in the sand. His back ached, arms sore, lips dry. But he didn't stop. Behind him, Vela lay strapped to the sled. Her eyes closed. She breathed slowly. One breath at a time. She looked peaceful. But he knew the infection was spreading. He could feel the heat coming off her, even from where he stood. The broken comms tower finally came into view. It stood crooked, half sunken into the earth. Wires dangled from the top like dead vines. But Jackson smiled. It was their only chance. He didn't know that something had already seen them. Far behind, hidden in the shadows of the rocks, something moved, tall, wide, silent, not metal, not flesh. A Seeker-class biohunter. Old tech from forgotten wars. It didn't care about sides. It hunted anything alive, and now it had locked onto them. Jackson reached the tower and dragged Vela inside. The walls were thick, but the air was stale. Dust danced in the light beams through cracked panels. He laid her on the floor and placed a hand on her forehead. Still hot, but stable. "Hold on," he whispered. "I'll get this working." He pulled the old control box from the wall. Wires snapped, sparks flew, but the power core still blinked. Faintly, he opened his pouch and pulled out a solar battery universal adapter. Plugged it in. The tower hummed softly. A red light turned green, signal broadcasting. A smile touched his lips. "They'll hear us," he said aloud. "They have to." But the air changed. A low vibration passed through the floor. He paused, his instincts rising. He reached for his rifle and stepped outside. There, at the edge of the rocks, something massive stepped into view, 8 feet tall, hunched, covered in armor that looked like bone. Its face had no eyes, only a wide mouth with breathing vents. A long tail dragged behind it, tipped with sharp metal. Jackson raised his rifle slowly. "What the hell?" he whispered. The Seeker turned its head. It had no eyes, but it had ears, and it had already heard him breathe. It sprinted forward faster than anything that big should move. Jackson fired. One shot bounced off. Second shot barely made a mark. He turned and ran back inside the tower, sealed the door with a metal rod. But the creature slammed into it seconds later. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Vela opened her eyes, dazed. "What is it?" she asked weakly. "Something big and something angry," Jackson said. Aiming his rifle at the door, the Seeker slammed again. Cracks spread across the door like spiderwebs. "We won't last long," he muttered. Then he saw an old crate in the corner with faded Tarian marks. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked, pointing. Vela blinked, then nodded. "Anti-armor cannon," she said. "Old, but strong." He ran to it, popped the lid. Inside was a long-barreled energy weapon, heavy but charged. He lifted it and returned to the door. The next slam broke it open halfway. He had one chance. "Open it all the way," Vela said. He looked at her, surprised. "Trust me," she whispered. Jackson took a deep breath, kicked the door open. The Seeker roared and charged in. He knelt, aimed, and fired straight at its center. A blast of white energy exploded from the cannon. It struck the creature's chest, burned through the outer shell. The Seeker staggered, screamed, and fell backward. Its body twitched, then went still. Silence returned. Jackson dropped the cannon and collapsed to the floor. His heart pounded, ears rang. Then he looked at her. "You still with me?" She gave a tiny nod. "You didn't miss." He laughed tiredly. "Not today." Outside, the tower's beacon blinked steadily. Up above, a signal reached orbit. A rescue ship turned its course. But in another place, in another dark room, a second Seeker's eyes blinked open, and it began to move. The wind had stopped. The battlefield was silent, but Jackson still couldn't sleep. He sat near the broken doorway of the old tower, rifle across his lap. The glow of the signal beacon flashed. Once every 10 seconds, a slow, steady heartbeat in a world full of broken promises. Behind him, Vela rested on a torn blanket. Her face was pale, her body wrapped in a heat sheet. The fever had dropped, but her body still fought. Jackson looked out across the open desert. Ash rocks, twisted metal. It was all quiet now, too. Quiet. He could still hear the echo of the Seeker's scream. He had killed it, but something told him that wasn't the end. Not yet then. A soft sound, Not wind, not machines, footsteps. Slow, steady, soft as falling sand, Jackson stood, raised his rifle, and aimed into the dust. Nothing. But the feeling didn't leave. He returned to Vela's side and sat down, his back against the cold wall. His eyes stayed on the doorway. Vela stirred. She opened her eyes and whispered, "You're still here." "Yeah." Jackson said, "I keep watch." She gave a weak smile. "You humans. You don't give up easily. Not when something's worth fighting for," he said quietly. She blinked, looking up at the broken roof. "Do you know what my people do to warriors who fail?" Jackson shook his head. "We don't get second chances," she said. "Not if we're broken. They left me not because I was dying, but because I was useless to them." Jackson frowned. "That's not right. It's not about right," she said, voice soft. "It's about honor. And in their eyes I lost mine." He didn't speak. She continued. "There was a girl once, a young warrior, the best in her class. She saved 6 officers in one battle, then took shrapnel to the spine. They made her disappear." Jackson swallowed. "You knew her?" "She was my sister," Vela whispered. Her voice cracked. "I fought harder just so I wouldn't end up like her." Jackson moved closer. "You didn't end up like her," he said. "You're still here, still fighting." Her eyes met his. In that moment, something shifted between them. Not enemy, not ally, just 2 people, broken in different ways, holding each other up. Then the beacon changed. The soft green blink turned blue. "Someone's coming," Jackson said, standing quickly. He checked the signal. Unknown ship, inbound, no ID, no flag. "That's not human," he muttered. Vela tried to sit up, but gasped. "It could be a patrol, from my side." Jackson's hand went to his rifle. "If they're here for you, I'm not letting them take you, Jackson." She said, surprised. "You don't have to." "I'm not walking away," he said. "Not from you." A shadow passed over the tower. Engines roared softly above. A sleek Tarian dropship lowered from the sky. Dark silver, bone-patterned hull. It landed just outside the doorway. Dust whipped through the air. 3 alien soldiers stepped down tall, armored, armed, and behind them, a familiar face, Captain Drexen, Vela's former squad leader. He stepped into the tower slowly, looked at Vela lying on the ground, then looked at Jackson. Unbelievable. Drexen said coldly, "You're alive." "No thanks to you," Vela replied. "You abandoned me." "You were damaged," Drexen replied with a shrug. "We do not carry the broken." Jackson stepped between them. "She's not broken," he said. "She survived more than you did," Drexen smirked. "A human defends her now?" "She's not yours to command anymore," Jackson said. "She made her choice." Vela struggled up, leaning on her arm, her voice clear. "I did make a choice. I chose the one who stayed." Drexen raised his hand. But one of the soldiers whispered in his ear. Something had changed. Their own sensors showed the second seeker was moving. "Coming this way, fast," Drexen cursed. "We'll be hunted if we stay." He turned to Vela one last time. "You could have returned with pride." "I found something better than pride," she answered. He turned and left. The dropship lifted and vanished into the red sky. Jackson helped her sit back against the wall. "You okay?" She nodded, tired, but more alive than I've felt in years. And in the distance, the wind returned, carrying not dust this time, but a new sound, a low hum, deep and steady. The second seeker was coming, but this time they were ready, together. The heat broke first, then came the wind, sharp, dry, howling through the broken canyon like a scream held too long. Dust flew into the air, turning the world orange. The sky vanished behind thick, spinning clouds. A sandstorm, not just any storm, one of the ancient kind, the kind that could bury a body in minutes, the kind that turned soldiers into bones. Inside the half-ruined tower, Jackson locked the door. Metal scraped against stone as he dragged heavy crates to block the entrance. His armor was covered in dirt and sweat, but he didn't care because Vela was burning. She lay on her side, shivering, Her skin, normally green, had turned a sick yellow. Her hands gripped the blanket, but her breath was slow and uneven. The wound on her leg had turned dark purple. Infection was winning. "Come on," Jackson whispered, kneeling beside her. "I need you to stay with me." Her eyes fluttered, open, unfocused. She stared at him but didn't speak. Instead, she muttered something in her own language, soft and sad, like a memory. He gently placed his hand on her forehead. She was on fire, worse than before. The meds were no longer enough. Jackson opened his emergency kit, one last syringe, a pain suppressor, not a cure, and not enough to stop what was happening. He pulled off his helmet and looked at her face. He had seen soldiers die before, but never like this. Not someone who had fought so hard just to live. He stood and searched the tower, top to bottom, every crate, every corner, and then he saw it. A metal box, marked with a strange symbol. Old Tarian medtech, locked tight. He used a broken knife to pry it open. Inside, an alien injector and one glowing vial. He ran back to her side. Her lips had turned dry and cracked, her voice barely a whisper. "Jackson." "I'm here," he said quickly. "You're not going anywhere." He had no idea what the vial contained, but she needed something, anything. He pushed the injector against her neck and pulled the trigger. The fluid disappeared into her body. For a moment, nothing. Then her body arched, eyes wide, glowing with green light. She gasped, shuddered, and collapsed back into his arms. He caught her gently. She blinked, slowly this time. The fever was breaking. Her breathing eased. The heat faded from her skin. Jackson exhaled for the first time in hours. He held her close, not like a soldier, but like someone holding something precious, someone afraid to let go. The storm outside pounded against the tower, but inside, peace, at least for now. Later, she woke again. This time her eyes were clear. She looked up at him and whispered, "You didn't leave." "Of course not," Jackson said. "I don't leave people behind." Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from something deeper. No one had ever stayed before, not even her own people. She reached for his hand. Weak fingers curled around his glove. "I was supposed to die out there," she said. "Maybe," he replied. "But now you've got another chance." A silence settled between them, not empty, but full of meaning. Two broken warriors, alive when they shouldn't be, together when they were meant to be enemies. As the storm began to fade, the air grew calm. Jackson looked out the crack in the tower wall. In the distance light, a small ship was coming. "Looks like someone heard the signal," he said. But Vela didn't smile. She looked worried. "What if it's not rescue?" "Then we face it," he said. "Together." She closed her eyes again, her voice soft but steady. "I'm not afraid anymore." The storm had passed, but the air was still heavy. Dust clung to every wall, and the sky outside was painted gray. Inside the broken tower, Vela sat up for the first time. Her body was weak, but her mind was clear. She looked down at the makeshift bandages on her legs, at the scars forming, the burns, the blood. But this time, she didn't look away. In shame, she looked at Jackson, sitting beside her, cleaning his weapon. His armor was scratched, his hands covered in cuts. But he looked at her like she still mattered, not as a broken soldier, but as a person. "You didn't run," she whispered. Jackson looked at her and smiled. "I told you I wouldn't." "Why?" she asked, voice cracking. "I'm Tarian. We were enemies just days ago." He set the rifle down and leaned forward. "Because war doesn't decide who deserves to be saved," he said. "You do." Vela didn't speak. Instead, she stared at the floor, then slowly reached up and touched her own face, as if reminding herself she was still real, still alive. The soft beep of the signal panel pulled them back. Jackson stood and checked it. "Someone's close," he said. "Coming." In low dropship class, Vela's heart beat faster. "It's them," she said. "Tarian." She pulled herself up with her elbows and looked through the crack in the tower wall. A sleek silver ship descended from the sky. Its hull carried the mark of House Drexen, her former squad. Jackson watched as the ship touched down. Dust clouds swirled around it, and 5 soldiers stepped out. In the front stood Captain Drexen, the one who had left her, the one who had called her useless. Vela's body went cold, not from fear, but from something else: disgust. The captain entered the tower without knocking, his armor spotless, his voice full of command. "Commander Vela," he said flatly, "you survived." She stared at him without speaking. He looked at Jackson with narrowed eyes. "And you?" "Human, still alive," Jackson replied calmly. "Strange combination," Drexen said. "A traitor and her pet." Vela's jaw tightened. "I was loyal," she said, "until loyalty meant death." "You were injured," Drexen said. "We made the hard choice." "No," she snapped. "You made the easy one." Drexen stepped closer. "You can return," he said. "You'll be honored if you leave the human behind." Jackson looked at her. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Vela turned her head slowly, eyes burning. "You left me to die," she said. "He carried me, he bled for me. He treated me like a warrior when you saw me as trash." The room fell silent. Drexen looked disgusted. "You would choose a human?" Vela pushed herself to sit taller. "I already did," she said. "And I'd do it again." One of the Turian soldiers raised his weapon, but Drexen raised a hand, his face twisted with anger and disbelief. "You're dead to us," he growled. "Then I'm finally free," she replied. Drexen turned and walked out. No words, no fight, just silence. The ship lifted and vanished into the sky. Jackson knelt beside her. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "My old world just ended," she said, "but I'm not afraid." "Because of me?" he asked quietly. She looked at him. "No," she whispered. "Because of us." That night, under a quiet sky, they sat beside each other, not as soldier and alien, not as enemies, but as survivors, and maybe something more in the distance. A human signal responded to the beacon. Rescue was on its way, but neither of them looked at the sky. They looked at each other, because they both knew something had already been saved. The human ship arrived just before sunrise. It came down slow, quiet, careful, like it already knew this wasn't a normal rescue. Jackson watched it land through a crack in the tower wall. The engines hummed softly, and for the first time in days he allowed himself to hope. Behind him, Vela sat on a crate, her legs covered with bandages and sensor wires. She was awake, alert, and calm, but her expression was unreadable. "They'll take you home," Jackson said, adjusting his gear. "You'll be safe now." She didn't answer right away, just looked out at the ship and the rising sun beyond it. A warm light touched her skin, the same light that had touched him since birth. Yet now, it felt like it belonged to both of them. The ship's ramp opened, and a human med officer stepped out. His eyes widened when he saw the alien warrior beside the Marine. He paused, then nodded slowly. "She with you?" he asked. Jackson replied without hesitation. "She's not just with me," he said. "She's alive because of me, and I'm alive because of her." The officer called for backup. 2 others came out with a stretcher, but Jackson raised his hand. "She walks out with me," he said firmly. "She deserves that much." Vela met his eyes, then pushed herself off the crate slowly. Her legs shook, but she stood. The prosthetics were temporary, rough, barely working, but they held her weight, and as she walked slow, shaky, Jackson reached to help. She shook her head. "I want to walk," she said softly. "If I fall, you can catch me," he smiled. "Deal." Step by step, they walked toward the ship, one human, one alien. Not broken, not alone, just together. When they reached the ramp, the med team stood back, watching. Vela paused, then looked back at the battlefield. At the broken tower, the burned sand, the distant shadows. "That place was my end," she whispered. "But you turned it into a beginning." Jackson gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "You could have gone back," he said. "Why didn't?" She looked up at him, eyes glowing soft green. "Because back there, I was only a weapon. Beside you." I became something else. What's that? He asked, voice quiet. She smiled. Someone worth saving. They stepped onto the ship. As the doors closed behind them, the engines roared to life, the ship rose into the sky, and the battlefield faded into memory. Inside the medbay, she sat beside him. Hooked to machines, healing, but stronger than ever. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small metal dog tag. He placed it into her hand. For luck, he said. She held it close. I don't believe in luck, then believe in me. He replied. Silence fell again, but this time it was peaceful, outside. The stars turned slowly above a world that had taken so much, but somehow had given something back. She leaned her head against his shoulder and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, You're my home now. And he didn't need to say anything back, because his arm around her said it all. Not every rescue ends with war, some end with something greater, something simple, something rare. She chose the human, and he chose her back, without question, without regret. And together, they walked into a future that didn't care about species, only about the bond they built through fire, blood, and mercy.